Good evening, friends. I am Captain Dr. D.K. Ramawat, working as a consultant cardiologist at Ramawat Heart and General Medicine Hospital, Badmer, Rajasthan, India. Today, we are going to deal the heart attack. The secrets of the heart attack explored layer by layer by Captain Dr. D.K. Ramawat. You might have attended so many CMEs of the heart attack, but I don't challenge that somebody have cleared the heart attack layer by layer. And it is a so lengthy topic that if I continue it for 3 days, like Vivekanand in Chicago in America, it won't finish. But I have churned it up, this topic, and out of that churning, I got the butter and cream which you will relish today. So, I hope you like these butter and cream. Let us start CME on secrets of the heart attack explored layer by layer by Captain Dr. D.K. Ramawat. So, this is the first slide of heart attack secret. Secret number 1 is that it is the introduction. The myocardial infarction or heart attack are terms used anonymously, but the preferred term is MI. In an MI, an area of the myocardium is permanently destroyed. MI is usually caused by reduced or decreased blood flow in a coronary artery due to rupture of an atheromatous plaque and subsequent occlusion of the artery by a thrombus. So that's the second secret. The joint European Society of Cardiology and American College of Cardiology Foundation and American Heart Association and World Health Federation task forces classified MI into 5 types on the basis of the underlying causes. Number 1 cause is spontaneous rupture of plaque. This is one type 1 MI. Then type 2 MI, secondary to an ischemic imbalance, that is oxygen supply and demand mismatch. The type 3 MI resulting in death when biomarkers values are unavailable. Type 4A, MI related to PCI. Type 4B, MI related to in-stent thrombosis. Forget not in-stent thrombosis. Then type 5 is MI related to CABG. So, now we will discuss the universal definition. This is the third secret. The fourth universal definition of the MI 2018. What is the new concept? Differentiation of myocardial infarction from injury. What is criteria of injury? Injury is used when there is evidence of elevated cardiac troponin values with at least one value above the 99th percentile of the upper reference limit. And injury is considered acute if there is a rise and fall of cardiac troponin values. There should be good rise and fall of cardiac troponin, not as little, but there should be very much fall. Then criteria for acute myocardial infarction, type 1, type 2 and type 3. The term acute myocardial infarction should be used when there is acute myocardial injury with clinical evidence of acute myocardial ischemia and with detection of rise and or fall of cardiac troponin values with at least one value above the 99th percentile of the upper reference limit and at least one of the following. In MI, these things should be there. One of the following 5 things. Number 1, there should be symptoms of myocardial ischemia. With injury, there should be these 5 things. Number 1, symptoms of myocardial ischemia. Second, new ischemic ECG changes. Number 3, development of pathological Q wave. And number 4, new loss of viable myocardium or new regional wall motion abnormality in a patient consistent with an ischemic etiology. Then 5th, the identification of a coronary thrombus by angiography or at autopsy. It is true for type 1 only. This line, identification of a coronary thrombus by angiography or at autopsy, is true only for type 1 only, not for type 2, because there is mismatch of the oxygen, and not for type 3 because there is when biomarkers are not available. This is your secret number 4. Criteria for acute myocardial infarction in type 4A, 4B and 5. In type 4A, it is PCI related MI if elevation of cardiac troponin values more than 5 times the 99th percentile of upper reference limit. And in type 4B, it is in-stent thrombosis. Forget not. In type 4B, it is in-stent thrombosis associated with MI when detected by coronary angiography or autopsy in the setting of myocardial ischemia and with a rise and or a fall in cardiac biomarker values and at least one value higher than the 99th percentile of upper reference limit. Then in type 5, it is CABG related MI if elevation of cardiac troponin value is more than 10 times the 99th percentile of upper reference limit. Now you have to remember one thing, that normal baseline value of cardiac troponin is less than 99th percentile of upper reference limit in serology. Now we will discuss type 1. Myocardial infarction type 1. It contains 2 things, STEMI and non-STEMI. Both are type 1. In STEMI there is plate rupture and erosion with occlusion of thrombus, means thrombus here occluding the whole lumen. Then it is called ST elevation MI. And NSTEMI means non-ST elevation MI because here plaque ruptures or erosion with non-occlusive thrombus, and thrombus occludes only partial lumen. Thrombus does not occlude total lumen. But here you have to remember one thing, it is essential to integrate ECG finding with the aim of classifying type 1 MI into STEMI or non-STEMI in order to establish the appropriate treatment according to the current guidelines. In treatment, in STEMI, you can give pharmacotherapy, but not in non-STEMI. Thrombolysis can be given only in ST elevation MI, but not in non-ST elevation MI. But percutaneous, this percutaneous treatment, like angiography and angioplasty, can be given in both the conditions. So you have to take ECG, whether it is STEMI or non-STEMI. That you can find out by the ECG. Then only you can do the treatment, not without doing ECG. It is contraindicated, this thrombolysis, in case of non-STEMI. Now this is the 5th secret of the heart attack. Role of biomarkers testing ST elevation myocardial infarction. What are the indications of troponin testing? I would like to show you. Here there are 4. Early troponin testing to guide reperfusion. In which conditions we have to reperfuse? If a patient is asymptomatic, ECG changes. If patient is asymptomatic and with ECG changes and non-diagnostic ECG changes are there, then you have to do the troponin testing. And when there is left bundle branch block without fulfilling STEMI criteria, you have to do this troponin testing. Then if there is pace rhythm, you have to do troponin testing. If it is post CABG with non-diagnostic ST elevation, you have to do troponin testing. Then second point I want to tell you, quantitative serial troponin in all STEMI patients should be done to estimate infarct size and prognosis. Never forget this point. Then troponin T or I levels are the most specific and sensitive test. Remember it. Then collect blood sample at presentation immediately. Often the biomarkers need to be repeated when the diagnosis of STEMI is uncertain. Then 6 point, negative troponin assay at 12-hour symptom onset. At 12-hour symptom onset practically excludes STEMI. Negative troponin assay at 12 hours after symptom onset practically excludes STEMI. Then know the limits and cutoff of the assay used in your hospital, in your serology laboratory. Then high sensitivity delta troponin. It is something different. High sensitivity delta troponin assay enables very early diagnosis. Then ninth, a repeat high sensitive troponin assay may be ordered within 2 to 3 hours. Then a rise or fall in serial troponin assay is more specific for an evolving ischemic injury of myocardium. Then lastly, CKMB testing may be done when troponin is not available or in late presenters to estimate infarct size. Now the sixth secret, very important. You will hardly find everywhere this table, this figure. Here I have discussed the delta troponin, very important for the students. So this is a flow chart of high sensitivity troponin T, means delta troponin, which is used in patients presenting with chest pain. Supposing a patient has come to you with possible ischemic presentations, then you do immediately 12-lead ECG. And if you find ST segment elevation present, go on the line of the STEMI guidelines treatment. And if you find ST segment elevation absent, then do baseline high sensitivity cardiac troponin T at first at 0 hours and repeat it after 2 hours of the serology. And in this case, when you have repeated after 2 hours and you have done at the 0 hours, then if you find that at the time of 0 hours and 2 hours, this high sensitivity cardiac troponin T is less than 99 percentiles and it is less than 4 nanogram per liter in both sexes, means both in male and female, then it is indication of low risk patient. So consider early discharge of the patient, and low risk patient should be assessed by non-invasive stress testing done by stress echocardiography, stress thallium, stress treatment test and a 12-lead ECG. Then if you find that at baseline, means at 0 hours, if you have done this cardiac troponin at 0 hour and you find high sensitivity T more than 100 nanogram per liter, it is highly indicative of acute MI and treat according to acute MI guideline. And if you find that after 1 hour of high sensitive troponin T, it is more than 99 percentile in both sexes, in male and female both, then prompt cardiac evaluation should be done and consider it myocardial injury. And if there is significant concentration of delta troponin, significant concentration means more than 10 nanogram per liter in female and more than 30 nanogram per liter in male, is indicative of acute MI and it is of high risk. So promptly treat as a acute MI. And if you find that there is high concentration, more than 10 nanogram per liter, yes, then this is acute myocardial injury. And if you find that with this ischemia is also present, if ischemia is present, then this is acute MI definite. And if ischemia is not present, then this is isolated myocardial injury. And what do you mean by isolated myocardial injury? When MI not associated with ischemic changes, it is simple regional myocardial injury called isolated myocardial injury, either in IRV, RV or LV. And if we find that this delta troponin is not more than 10 nanogram per liter, then you consider chronic myocardial injury or possible late MI. One thing I forgot to tell you, you have to note one thing. A delta troponin more than 30% with one value for troponin T, high sensitivity, more than 14 nanogram per liter for man and more than 10 nanogram per liter for women is consistent with an acute myocardial infarction in the right clinical setting. Delta troponin is a continuous variable that is a more rapid rise or fall is more suggestive of acute myocardial infarction than a smaller rise or fall. So in man it should be troponin T high sensitivity more than 14 nanogram per liter to indicate MI, and in female it should be only more than 10 nanogram per liter to indicate MI. This is the seventh secret of myocardial infarction. Pre-discharge risk stratification by non-invasive stress testing for ischemia in emergency department. First is high risk, second intermediate risk, and third low risk. High risk means more than 3% annual mortality rate. And intermediate risk means 1 to 3% annual mortality rate. And low risk means less than 1% annual mortality rate. Supposing patient is of high risk, so here left ventricular ejection fraction will be less than 0.35%. And here high risk treatment score will be less than -11. It comes in minus. Don't confuse. Score comes in -11 in high risk treatment score. It indicates 5-year survival of 65%, and among them means among 65%, 74% had TVD, triple vessel disease, or left main coronary artery occlusion. And severe exercise LV dysfunction will be less than 35%. Exercise ejection fraction will be less than 35%. Stress-induced large perfusion defect, particularly of anterior, is seen here. And stress-induced multiple perfusion defect of moderate size seen here. And large fixed perfusion defect with LV dilation or increased lung uptake by thallium-201 is noted here. Then echocardiographically, there will be valvular abnormality involving more than 2 segments developing at low dose of dobutamine, means 10 microgram per kg per minute or less, or at a low heart rate, means heart rate will be less than 120 beats per minute. Now we come to the intermediate risk. So in intermediate risk, it is 1 to 3% annual mortality rate, and here mild to moderate resting LV dysfunction will be 35 to 49%, and intermediate risk treatment score will be -11 to +5, indicates 5-year survival rate of 90%. In high risk, 5-year survival rate of 65%, and intermediate risk, it is 5-year survival of 90%. Stress-induced moderate perfusion defect without LV dilation is seen, or increased lung uptake by thallium-201 is noted here. And limited stress echocardiographic ischemia, that is wall motion abnormality only at higher doses of dobutamine involving less than or equal to two segments seen here. Then we come lastly to low risk. Here it is less than 1% annual mortality. And here normal or small myocardial perfusion defect at rest with stress seen. And normal stress echocardiographic wall motion or no change or limited resting wall motion abnormality during stress is seen. Here low risk treatment score is more than 5. There it was -11 in high risk, and intermediate -11 to 5, and here more than 5. Or negative treatment test indicates a 5-year survival of 97%. In high risk, 5-year survival of 65%. In intermediate risk, 5-year survival of 90%. And in low risk, it is 5-year survival of 97%. Now secret number 8. The testing matters and serial sampling is important. Delta troponin calculator. A delta troponin more than 30% with one value for the troponin T, high sensitivity more than 14 nanogram per liter for man and more than 10 nanogram per liter for women is consistent with an acute MI in the right clinical setting. Delta troponin is a continuous variable, that is a more rapid rise or fall is more suggestive of AMI than smaller rise or fall. During an AMI, troponins rise rapidly from about 2 to 6 hours after the onset of symptoms to peak at 18 to 24 hours, followed by a fall over 7 to 10 days. In other clinical settings, troponins typically change more slowly or have a delta value less than 30%. Now this is secret number 9. Here type 1 MI and type 2 MI or non-MI troponin elevation we will discuss. Supposing a patient is with troponin positive, now you have to find out whether there is clinical evidence of overt ischemia or there is no ischemia. So clinical evidence of ischemia you will note by new symptoms of acute myocardial ischemia or new ECG changes, or by imaging new infarction or wall motion abnormality by echocardiography, or serial troponins show characteristic rise and fall. But if there is no overt ischemia, then there will be no ischemic changes in ECG or imaging findings, and serial troponins will show little variation or smaller rise or fall. So if you find a case with overt ischemia, then you have to see two things. Number one, acute coronary thrombus is there, and if there is acute coronary thrombus, it will document type 1, and type 1 documents both STEMI and non-STEMI. And if you see, if you don't see this acute coronary thrombus, then you will see oxygen supply demand mismatch, and this will document type 2 MI secondary to underlying causes. So what are the underlying causes in type 2 MI when there is oxygen supply and demand mismatch is there? For example, if there is cardiac causes, so there will be tachyarrhythmias and bradyarrhythmias and the severe aortic valve diseases and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, then the acute heart failure, then coronary vasospasm, then coronary embolism, then coronary vasculitis, and then spontaneous coronary artery dissection. And also systemic causes can be there. For example, hypertensive emergency, non-cardiac surgery, critical illness, shock, whether it is cardiogenic or hypovolemic, and there can be hypoxic respiratory failure, or there can be severe anemia, means acute blood loss or hemolysis. Now we come to the without aortic ischemia. Here it will document non-MI troponin elevation secondary to underlying causes. Means there is no MI, but troponin level is high, very typical thing. There is no MI, but troponin is elevating secondary to underlying causes. Supposing there are cardiac causes, it can be due to tachyarrhythmia, means atrial fibrillation, or and bradyarrhythmias, then severe aortic valve diseases, hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, acute heart failure, stress cardiomyopathy, Takotsubo, blunt cardiac injury, contusion, CPR, chest compression, defibrillatory shocks, cardiac ablation, cardiac non-CABG surgery, myocarditis, pericarditis, endocarditis, and cardiotoxic agent, chemotherapy, infiltrative diseases like amyloid and sarcoid, cardiac tumors, malignancies, myopathies, and muscular dystrophy. And if there is systemic causes, there will be hypertensive emergency, non-cardiac surgery, critical illness, pulmonary embolism, pulmonary hypertension, sepsis, renal failure, end-stage renal diseases, stroke, subarachnoid hemorrhage, rhabdomyolysis, stenosis exercise, and burn injuries to body, diabetic ketoacidosis, and hypertrophic antibodies, means these are the false positive, and other emergency causes also. And here I have shown you the heterophilic antibodies. Heterophilic antibodies. These are the antibodies induced by external antigens. For example, in rheumatic fever, antibodies against group A streptococci cell walls can in group A streptococci cell walls can also react with human heart tissues. So this is your secret number 10. Here abnormally high cardiac troponin T will be seen, that is more than 99 percentile of upper reference limit. Here you will see three things. First you will see myocardial lesions excluding infarction. Second you will see myocardial infarction. And third you will see chronic abnormal increase in cardiac troponin. So first we will take myocardial lesions excluding infarction. Means there is abnormally high troponin, abnormally, but there is no MI. It will occur in non-ischemic causes, for example, cardiac, contusion, AV ablation, pacing, defibrillatory shock, myocarditis, and this is your chemotherapy. Also it is found in it is multifactorial or indeterminate causes. Common or classical settings are aortic cardiac insufficiency, acute cardiac insufficiency, cerebrovascular accident, hemorrhagic stroke, and Takotsubo, pulmonary embolism, sepsis, and severe disorders, and this infiltrative cardiomyopathy, amyloidosis, and stenosis exertion. Then if you find the myocardial infarction in abnormally high troponin, then you have to see three things. Number one, whether it is type 1, type 2, 4A, 4B, 5 or type 3. So in type 1, there is atheromatous plaque rupture. In type 2, there is mismatch with oxygen supply and demand, or without CAD. There is no CAD, but there is oxygen supply demand mismatch. So, what are those causes? Causes of mismatch supply and demand of the oxygen: tachybradyarrhythmia, myocardial hypertrophy, cardiogenic hypovolemic or septic shock, severe or acute respiratory failure, severe anemia, hypertension with or without LVH. And if there is type 4A and B5, it is post-procedural, both. Post PCI, after PCI, 4A means there will be cardiac troponin will be more than 5 times of the 99th percentile of upper reference limit. And if it is post CABG, then there will be more than 10 times cardiac troponin, more than 10 times of the 99th percentile of the cardiac troponin. And you must note one thing, here it is more than 10 times of the 99th percentile. You have to note one thing, in type 3 MI resulting in death when biomarker values are unavailable. Forget not, type 3 MI resulting in death when biomarkers values are unavailable. And type 4B MI related to in-stent thrombosis. 4B MI related to in-stent thrombosis. Now we will go to chronic abnormal increase in cardiac troponin. You will find in 4 things. Number 1, diabetes. Second, renal insufficiency. Third, cardiac insufficiency means heart failure. And fourth and last, cardiopathy. Now secret number 11, etiology. The acute MI process takes time. Cardiac cells can withstand in ischemic conditions for approximately 20 minutes before cellular death begins. The earliest tissue to become ischemic is the subendocardium, the innermost layer of tissue in the cardiac muscles. If ischemia persists, it takes approximately 4 to 6 hours for the entire thickness of the heart muscle to become necrosed. Now, secret number 12, high risk features for non-ST elevation MI or unstable angina, that is type 1 MI. Here history you have to take that there will be accelerating ischemic symptoms in preceding 48 hours, or there will be prolonged rest pain more than 20 minutes, or in clinical features you will find pulmonary edema, most likely due to ischemia, new or worsening mitral regurgitation, or you will find S3 or new worsening rails, or you will find hypotension, bradycardia, tachycardia, or you will find age greater than 75 years. And in ECG you will find transient ST segment changes greater than 0.5 millimeter, and you will find bundle branch block or sustained VT. Then cardiac biomarkers, serologically you can see elevated cardiac troponin T or I or CKMB. And here cardiac troponin T or I will be more than 0.1 nanogram per ml. This is the normal value. And if you see more than this, then this is the MI. Secret number 13. Here I would like to show you, in the absence of LVH, left bundle branch block, paced rhythm and channelopathy, ECG at presentation in ST elevation myocardial infarction will be what? Now here word is channelopathy. What do you mean by channelopathy? Means long QT syndrome, Bargetta syndrome, short QT syndrome and catecholaminergic polymorphic VT are characterized by malignant arrhythmia in a normal heart resulting from genetic alterations in ion channels or associated proteins. So if there are typical changes, you will find ST elevation in at least 2 continuous leads, then 2 millimeter in man or 1.5 millimeter in woman in lead V2 to V3. This elevation will be seen, and then ST elevation 1 millimeter in other continuous chest leads or limb leads will be seen, or new or presumably new left bundle branch block will be seen. And atypical changes you will see STEMI in evaluation. There will be hyperactive T wave changes, or evolving or evolved STEMI is there. Then you will find Q waves with T wave inversions with variable ST elevations. Then supposing there is a posterior wall MI, you will find ST depression in 2 pericordial leads V1 to V3 plus positive T wave in V1. Then left main or proximal left anti-descending artery occlusion is present. Either left main or proximal left anterior descending artery occlusion present, then you will find ST depression in multiple leads with ST elevation in leads AVR and V1. And if elevation in AVR is more than V1, then left main is blocked. And if elevation in V1 is more than AVR, then proximal LAD is blocked. Now this is secret number 14. Here criteria proposed by Sagar-Bosa to diagnose ST elevation, myocardial infarction in presence of left bundle branch block and paced rhythm. Here, this is the first concordant, this is second concordant, this is third discordant. So it is only for left bundle branch block and paced rhythm. So in first concordant ST elevation, because it is with the QRS complex. Concordant ST elevation more than 1 millimeter in leads with a positive QRS complex. In leads with a positive QRS complex, and here score will be given 5. Concordant ST elevation more than 1 millimeter in leads with a positive QR complex, and scores are given 5. And second, concordant ST depression. Second, concordant ST depression more than 1 millimeter in V1 to V3, V1, V2, V3, and here score will be given 3, and this is called posterior wall MI. This is called posterior wall MI. Then third, this is excessively discordant. Excessively discordant ST elevation. You see, more than 5 millimeter leads with a negative QRS. It is with negative QRS complex. QRS is downward and elevation is upwards of the baseline. It is more than 5 millimeter elevation in opposite direction to the QRS complex. So this is discordant, and here score is given 2 only. So you can, by this chart, you can see the ST elevation MI in the case of LBB and paced rhythm. Secret number 15, site of coronary artery occlusion in ST segment elevation MI. So here you are seeing these ECG changes of left anterior descending occlusion. So if you see these changes, you must think of that proximal first septal is blocked or proximal first diagonal is blocked. If these proximal, diagonal and first septal blocked, then think these ECG changes. And if you find that distal first septal and proximal first diagonal is blocked, you will find these ECG changes. And if you find in LAD occlusion that there is blockage of distal first septal and there is there is blockage of first diagonal. Yes, this is distal first septal and distal first diagonal. If these are two blocked at distal point, these ECG changes will be seen. Secret number 18. If you see distal LED occlusion, these ECG changes will be seen. Secret number 19. If you see left circumflex occlusion, this is left circumflex, these ECG changes will be seen. And if you see right coronary artery occlusion, these ECG changes will be seen. This is now secret number 21st. If you see the left main coronary artery occlusion, this is left main coronary artery occlusion, then you will see these 4 ECG changes. Then the 22nd secret of the MI, medical management of the client with MI. The goal of medical management is first, minimize myocardial damage. Second, preserve myocardial function and prevent complications. Third, minimizing myocardial damage is also reducing myocardial oxygen demand and increasing oxygen supply. Now, concept of revascularization and reperfusion therapy is to open 100% thrombus containing blocked coronary artery, that is, we want TIMI-3 flow. Now, cornerstone of STEMI in initial 12 hours of symptom onset is reperfusion therapy. Most efficacious reperfusion therapy available is timely primary PCI, but in India, most recent data suggests only 8% patients receive PCI therapy. Remaining 60% receive thrombolysis and remaining 32% does not receive any reperfusion treatment. Now, this is 23rd secret of MI. With STEMI, acute coronary syndrome, type 1 MI, according to American College of Cardiology and Foundation and American Heart Association updated in 2014, timing of PCI should be what? Here I am showing timing of PCI. Supposing patient is having refractory angina. Now, what do you mean by refractory angina? You just say refractory angina is defined as the occurrence of frequent anginal attacks uncontrolled by oral medical treatment and significantly limiting the patient's daily activities. So, if you find refractory angina or if you find recurrent episodes of angina despite medical therapy, or if you find acute heart failure, or if you find sustained VT or VF or cardiac arrest, or if you find hemodynamic instability like cardiogenic shock, or if you find mechanical complications with mitral regurgitation, you do PCI immediately within less than 2 hours. You have to do PCI within less than 2 hours. Then secondly, if you find new dynamic STT changes with or without pain, or if you find Grace score more than 140, or if you find sufficient rise or fall in cardiac biomarkers, you have to do PCI within less than 24 hours. And if you find diabetes mellitus, or if you find renal dysfunction, means GFR less than 60 ml, or if you find ejection fraction less than 40%, or if you find Grace score 109 to 140, or if you find TIMI score. Here TIMI score, not TIMI score flow, not TIMI flow. Here thrombus, TIMI thrombus score more than 2 or higher, or prior PCI or CABG patient, or presence of posterior MI angina, or high risk features on non-invasive testing present, then you can do the PCI within 25 to 72 hours. Then I want to tell you something very this interesting and very important, that a heart team approach is required. What is heart team approach? Involving interventional cardiologist and cardiac surgeon. These are required when there is diabetes mellitus present, and when there is multivessel coronary artery diseases like triple vessel disease of 70% stenosis or greater, and double vessel disease of 70% stenosis or greater involving the proximal LAD plus at least one non-culprit lesion and a fractional flow reserve less than 0.80 in a vessel of diameter of more than 2.5 millimeter is present. Then thirdly, severe left main disease present means 50% stenosis or greater stenosis, or a high syntax score more than 33 is present. Then you require heart team approach involving interventional cardiologists and cardiac surgeons. Now this is the 24th secret of MI. Here I will like to show you comments on the 2017 European Society of Cardiology guidelines for the management of acute MI in patients presenting with ST segment elevation via emergency medical services or in a non-PCI center. In non-thrombolyzed patients presenting less than 12 hours of onset of chest pain, listen carefully, it is very important. Every passing minute without reperfusion, every passing minute without reperfusion indicates lost opportunity for salvaging myocardium. I again repeat, every passing minute without reperfusion indicates lost opportunity for salvaging myocardium. Therefore, management in this period is time is muscle. If you waste time, your muscle will go more and more necrosis. If you take less time, your muscles will not be necrosed. So, if ischemia persists, it takes approximately 4 to 6 hours for the entire thickness of heart muscle to become necrosed. I again repeat this. If ischemia persists, it takes approximately 4 to 6 hours for the entire thickness of the heart muscle to become necrosed. Here you have to remember 3 points. Point number 1, transportation time to the hospital. Transportation time to the hospital. The goal is to keep total ischemic time within 120 minutes. At emergency medical services and at non-PCI capable hospital, door to needle time should be within 30 minutes in patient for 5 minutes. And thirdly, at PCI capable hospital, the hospital door to balloon time should be within 90 minutes for PCI. This is the chart for this. Now you can see the 25th criteria to find out the, for ruling out, not ruling out, but to, this is the 25th secret of MI. Maximum target times according to reperfusion strategy in patients presenting via emergency medical services or in a non-PCI center. Again I repeat these 3 things. Transportation time to the hospital. The goal is to keep total ischemic time within 120 minutes. Second, the emergency medical services and at non-PCI capable hospitals, door to needle time should be within 30 minutes in patient for fibrinolysis. Third point, at PCI capable hospital, the hospital door to balloon time should be within 90 minutes for PCI. Now the very important point, listen carefully, open your mind, open your ears. If you find failed thrombolysis, thrombolysis, which can be diagnosed by persisting or worsening chest pain or less than 50% resolution of ST segment elevation after 90 minutes of thrombolysis in lead showing maximum ST segment elevation at presentation. I repeat again this point, less than 50% resolution of ST segment elevation after 90 minutes of thrombolysis in the lead showing maximum ST elevation at presentation. Then what to do? Very important. You must go for rescue PCI. That's all. Now, 26 secret proposed trials plan for patients of STEMI, rural and urban. Now, patient has presented with STEMI and it is a big city, go for primary PCI. And if patient is in the small town, so then you go for hospital-based thrombolytic therapy. And if thrombolytic therapy failed, means there is failed thrombolysis, go for rescue PCI. Or you can go for pharmacoinvasive therapy. And in big city also, if you don't want PCI, you can also go for hospital-based thrombolytic therapy. If there is a village, go for thrombolysis in nearest possible hospital. If it fails, go for rescue PCI. And when no viability of cardiac muscle seen by positron emission tomography imaging, then go for either rescue PCI or pharmacoinvasive therapy. Now, this is 27th secret of the MI. Here, management of STEMI at PCI non-capable center. PCI non-capable center. Maintain the first medical contact to balloon time less than 120 minutes. Management plan for patients or STEMI presenting at PCI non-capable hospital. Supposing you have diagnosed STEMI and duration is less than 12 hours, what to do? Give oxygen, give aspirin, give clopidogrel and give statins. And if thrombolysis incapable center is present, then transfer for thrombolysis. And if the patient is thrombolized, give ACE inhibitor and beta blocker. If it is successful, transfer for PCI within 3 to 24 hours if possible. If after thrombolysis is not successful, then immediate transfer for PCI. If thrombolysis is not successful, immediate transfer for PCI. And after oxygen, aspirin, clopidogrel, statin, decide reperfusion strategy. So transfer to PCI capable center for PCI within 120 minutes. Forget not, transportation time to the hospital. The goal is to keep total ischemic time within 120 minutes. Now this is the secret number 28. Whenever the expected delay exceeds 60 minutes, thrombolytic therapy should be promptly initiated as a part of pharmaco-invasive approach. So, management strategies for patients of STEMI presenting to a PCI-capable hospital. Supposing patient has come with STEMI and it is less than 12 hours, and if he is thrombolyzed, send for PCI. If PCI not feasible, transfer to ICCU for medical treatment. And if he is not thrombolyzed, send to PCI for PCI to cath lab. And if PCI not feasible, immediate thrombolysis should be given because he is non-thrombolyzed. Then supposing STEMI reported within 12 to 24 hours and he is thrombolyzed, do PCI. If PCI not feasible, then medical treatment in ICCU given. If patient non-thrombolyzed after 12 to 24 hours, then PCI should be done if clinical and or ECG signs of ongoing ischemia present. If PCI not feasible, late thrombolysis done if clinical and or ECG signs of ongoing ischemia present. Now here I tell you a threefold increase in hospital death. A threefold increase in hospital death is reported when door to needle time, when door to needle time exceeds 60 minutes, and when door to balloon time exceeds 120 minutes. Most patients do not use emergency medical services, and most emergency medical services are not well equipped. Hence, pre-hospital fibrinolysis still remains a challenge. Pre-hospital fibrinolysis still remains a challenge. This is 29th secret of MI. Routine PCI 3 days to weeks after AMI is not recommended. Listen carefully. Routine PCI 3 days to weeks after AMI is not recommended. Acute MI presenting more than 24 hours from symptom onset. What to do? Late presentation more than 24 hours if he is having hypotension, heart failure, electrical instability, ongoing ischemia, go for CAG, coronary artery bypass surgery. And if there is high risk like diabetes and there is kidney failure, or if there is ejection fraction less than 14 or diabetes mellitus, then what to do? Go for a heart team approach. I have already discussed what is heart team approach. And go for coronary artery bypass surgery. Here you can do subtotal significant occlusion of infarct-related artery, or you can do 100% occlusion of infarct-related artery. CAG done in subtotal also and in 100% occlusion also. And if you see that viability assessment do by positron emission tomography and viability is present, revascularization should be done. If not present, go for pharmacoinvasive therapy. And if you see that high risk features I have already discussed, and ischemia is present, and viability also present, or you can say high risk features or ischemia present and viability not present, then go for pharmacoinvasive therapy. And if you see there is no high risk and ejection fraction is more than 40, or there is no diabetes, you can discharge, pre-discharge by doing stress test, by non-invasive stress testing done by stress echo, stress thallium and stress treadmill. I hope you must have understood what I want to tell you. Now the point arises, what is subtotal occlusion? Subtotal coronary occlusion was defined severe stenosis of more than 99%, but with some tenuous anterograde blood flow. The collateral circulation vessels were defined as a direct communication between two ends of an occlusion via small collateral vessels. Now we have come to the 30th point, 30th secret of MI, management of complications of STEMI. First is the VSD. You can see by the echocardiography whether there is left to right shunt or right to left shunt. And also you can do LV angiography and you can find out nature of the septal defect with number of holes. And you can, by echocardiography, also you can see the papillary muscle rupture. And you will see swinging, frail swinging or mitral wall, severe MR. And if you see pre-wall rupture, so there are three complications: VSD, papillary muscle rupture and pre-wall rupture. In pre-wall rupture, you can see by echocardiography, so there will be massive pericardial effusion more than 5 mm around the heart. And here you will see electromechanical dissociation by ECG. So all these warrants urgent coronary angiography for active management. You see, because of diffuse myocardial ischemia, there is no myocardial contraction. The simultaneous ECG and arterial pressure tracing can reveal a variety of organized ECG rhythm. For example, sinus rhythm, all degree of heart block, idioventricular rhythm, myocardial, all without an arterial pressure. I again repeat it, because of diffuse myocardial ischemia, there is no myocardial contraction. The simultaneous ECG and arterial pressure tracing can reveal a variety of organized ECG rhythm, for example, sinus rhythm, all degree of heart blocks, idioventricular rhythm, etc., all without an arterial pressure. They are corrected by restoration of myocardial reperfusion. A palpable pulse generator and QRS complex usually respond well to pharmacological intervention or pacing. Here you see this is pulseless electrical activity or this electromagnetic dissociation. They are non-shockable. This is VF, VT and asystole. Immediate resume CPR for 2 minutes, establish vascular access, administer epinephrine every 3 to 5 minutes, consider advanced and tidal CO2 monitoring. And if you see pulseless electrical activity, causes are these 6 and these 6. 6H, hyperkalemia, hypoxia, hypothermia, hydrogen ion excess means acidosis, hypovolemia, hypoglycemia, and 6T means tamponade cardiac, tension pneumothorax, thrombosis pulmonary embolus, thrombosis myocardial infarction, toxins and trauma. You have to treat all these. This is the 31st secret of MI. Pharmacological treatment of MI at the site of first medical contact. You have to give oxygen, nitroglycerin, aspirin and morphine. Oxygen 2 to 4 liters per minute, 100% oxygen for 6 to 12 hours by mask or nasal swabs. Nitroglycerin 0.5 mg sublingual or buccal spray, total 3 doses at 5 minutes interval. Then aspirin 160 to 325 mg orally chewed. Then morphine 4 to 8 mg IV and 2 to 8 mg repeated at 5 to 15 minutes interval. This is the 32 secret. Relief of hypoxemia and symptoms. Here I would like to tell you, oxygen saturation can be assessed by SaO2 or SpO2. SaO2 is oxygen saturation of arterial blood measured by spectrophotometry, while SpO2 is oxygen saturation as detected by the pulse oximeter. The partial pressure of oxygen is expressed as PO2 and the partial pressure of arterial blood is expressed as PaO2 and measured by a Clark electrode. Normal PaO2 values 80 to 100 mm of mercury. Estimated normal PaO2 is 100 mm of mercury. Hypoxemia is considered when PaO2 is less than 50 millimeter of the mercury. So, you have to measure the level of hypoxemia. Oxygen is indicated in patient with hypoxemia. If SaO2 or SpO2 is less than 90% or PaO2 is less than 60 mm mercury, give oxygen. Routine oxygen is not recommended in patients with SaO2 or SpO2 more than 90%. And what will be the symptoms of hypoxemia? In case of chest pain, IV opioid should be considered to relieve the chest pain. In case of anxious patient, a mild tranquilizer, usually a benzodiazepine should be given. Now this is the 33rd secret of the mind. Here I will tell you loading of dual antiplatelet therapy and anticoagulation if you opt thrombolysis strategy. Dual antiplatelet therapy is aspirin 160 to 325 mg, stat then 75 to 150 mg per day. And second, clopidogrel 300 to 600 mg loading dose, then 75 mg per day. Here time to peak platelet inhibition we have to calculate. Clopidogrel if given 75 mg, then time to peak platelet inhibition will be 3 to 5 days. If clopidogrel 300 mg bolus given, then it is 4 to 6 hours. If 600 mg bolus given, it is 2 hours only. And DAPT continued up to 12 months. You have to note one thing, prolonged DAPT more than 12 months indicated in patient of high risk, for example, DAPT score more than 2 and with low bleeding risk. And monotherapy can be given lifelong. Then anticoagulation given by low molecular weight heparin, injection enoxaparin, 30 mg IV bolus once plus 1 mg per kg subcutaneous once, followed by 1 mg per kg subcutaneous every 12 hours, maximum 100 mg for the first 2 doses only, followed by 1 mg per kg for the remaining doses. Duration of therapy is usually 2 to 8 days and up to 12.5 days has been well tolerated clinically. Then second anticoagulation you can use fondaparinux sodium, 2.5 mg IV for the first dose and then 2.5 mg subcutaneous OD for 9 days. Now this is the 34th secret of MI. Loading of neuroantiplatelet used only if you go for primary angioplasty and transferring patient to primary angioplasty capable center. There are two drugs, prasugrel and ticagrelor. Prasugrel, newer, more potent and non-reversible P2 Y12 inhibitor. 60 mg loading followed by 10 mg OD, maintenance dose given with aspirin. Remember, given with aspirin 75 mg to 325 mg per day, for at least 12 months. Time to peak platelet inhibition in prasugrel 60 mg bolus is 30 minutes only. Remember, in 30 minutes only. You have to note here, diabetes patients, especially on insulin, were benefited mostly by prasugrel. Then contraindication of this is body weight less than 60 kg, age more than 75, history of prior stroke. Then ticagrelor, newer and more potent, a first reversible. Here it was non-reversible, but this is reversible oral P2Y12 inhibitor. 180 mg loading dose followed by 90 mg BD maintenance dose with low dose of aspirin. 125 mg once, then 50 to 100 mg for at least 12 months. Time to peak platelet inhibition, ticagrelor 180 mg bolus is 30 minutes only. Within 30 minutes there will be platelet inhibition, and its side effects will be dyspnea in 14 to 20% patients and bradycardia. And contraindication of this drug is who have received thrombolysis. Then here you have to note in this drug missing single day therapy. Missing single day therapy of ticagrelor normalizes platelet function immediately and have a higher risk of getting a blood clot in instant, having a higher risk of getting a blood clot in instant, having a heart attack and death. Now we have come to 35th secret. Here I have shown you the classifications of recommendations of guidelines of by American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association and European Society of Cardiology. Classification of recommendations. You see, if you recommend, if there is class 1 recommendation, means what? Means the drug is given, the given treatment or procedure is beneficial, useful and effective. If it is class 2A, it is reasonable to perform procedure or administer treatment. If it is class 2B, procedure treatment may be considered. If it is class 3rd, procedure or treatment should not be performed or administered because it is not helpful and may be harmful. Then what does level of evidence used in the guideline means? Level of evidence A means multiple studies support the recommendation. Level of evidence means limited number of studies support the recommendation. Level of evidence C means single study, retrospective study or the registry support the recommendations. Now the 36th secret of MI. We are giving now fibrinolytic therapy. So recommendations is what? Fibrinolytic therapy is recommended within 24 hours of symptom onset in patient without contraindication if primary PCI cannot be performed by an experienced team within 120 minutes of first medical contact. In patients presenting early, less than 2 hours after symptom onset with a large infarct and low bleeding risk, fibrinolysis should be considered if time from first medical contact to balloon inflation is more than 90 minutes. If possible, fibrinolysis should start in the pre-hospital setting. A fibrin specific agent, the tenecteplase, altiplase, retiplase should be recommended over a non-fibrin specific agent like STK. Now oral or IV aspirin must be administered with it, and clopidogrel is indicated in addition to aspirin. Then antithrombin co-therapy with fibrinolysis should be given. Anticoagulation is recommended in STEMI patient treated with lytics until revascularization is performed or for the duration of hospital stay up to 8 days. The anticoagulation can be enoxaparin IV followed by subcutaneous using the regime described below. It is preferred over unfractionated heparin. Unfractionated heparin given as a weight adjusted IV bolus of 60 units per kg and infusion of 12 units per kg per hour. Patient treated with streptokinase, fondaparinux IV bolus followed by subcutaneous dosage 24 hours later given for 9 days. Then following fibrinolysis, patient is transferred to a PCI capable center and it is indicated in all patients after fibrinolysis. Then the interventions following fibrinolysis. Recent PCI is indicated immediately when fibrinolysis has failed. Rescue PCI is indicated immediately when fibrinolysis has failed. Failed means what? Less than 50% ST segment resolution at 90 minutes after thrombolysis is called failed thrombolysis. So you must use rescue PCI. The emergency PCI is indicated in the case of recurrent ischemia or evidence of reocclusion after initial successful fibrinolysis. Then emergency angiography with a view to revascularization is indicated in heart failure or shock patient. Then angiography with a view to revascularization of the infarct-related artery is indicated after successful fibrinolysis. Then optimum timing of angiography for stable patient after successful lysis is 3 to 24 hours. So this is 37th secret of the MI. Here you can see sinus rhythm at 66 beats per minute. Negative T waves in V2 through V2 to V5 and mild apical hypokinesis by echo. So diagnosis of non-ST segment elevation MI was noted. Here you can see severe stenosis at the left anterior descending artery at ostium. At ostium there is severe stenosis and at the union of the LAD proximal and middle level. It is proximal and middle level there is occlusion. But you say, showing final result after stent implantation, stent has been given to at ostium and at midway. So thrombus is aspirated and you can see TIMI3 flow of blood, TIMI3 blood flow. This is 39th secret, grade 4 intracoronary thrombus in both left anterior descending artery and first diagonal branch. See this. Coronary angiography after thrombus aspiration showing effective epicardial flow. TIMI3 flow seen. TIMI3 flow after thrombus aspiration by angioplasty. Altogether, the TIMI classification relies on the angiographic assessment of the presence of thrombus. Here we are classifying thrombus, not TIMI flow. So altogether, the TIMI classification relies on the angiographic assessment of the presence of thrombus and its relative size, utilizing a simple score ranging from grade 0 means no thrombus to grade 5 means very large thrombus content that completely occlude vessel flow. Here you can see the right coronary artery with a severe neuron, red arrow. After angioplasty and stenting showing resolution of the narrowing. And you can see TIMI-3 flow, TIMI-3 flow. Here, now you can see, last but not the least, 41 secret. The conclusion, what to take home message. First, percutaneous intervention has become the mainstay of definitive management owing to technical advancement in both technique and devices. Real world data portend once a very serious picture and much needs to be done in our country. Correct diagnosis of MI at the site of first medical contact required, and decision is made that which revascularization strategy should be used, whether primary PCI or thrombolysis. Primary PCI is preferred therapy for the acute STEMI as it is a gold standard. And it is supremo in efficacy as compared to thrombolysis. Why? Because superior efficacy means 90% restoration TIMI-3 flow. Then superior safety means less stroke and less bleeding. Then superior long-term outcome means less reinfarction and less restenosis. Then better outcome for high-risk patients. And lastly, fifth point, I would like to tell you 3 types of interventions done for left main coronary artery disease with 50% or greater stenosis of left coronary artery. First, by medical therapy, including lifestyle changes program, success rate was 84%. Secondly, we gave angioplasty with stent implantation, success rate was 91%. Then lastly, third, we gave surgery with minimally invasive direct CABG with left internal mammillary artery via a left anterior mini thoracotomy with a 5 to 10 centimeter incision only, and success rate was 97%. So, you might have understood all the secrets of the heart attack which I have told you now, and they were all very easy to understand. And I thank you very much for your kind attention, for watching the CME. I again thank you. I thank you for your kind attention, for watching the CME.